names that we're hearing about, Harry, Maude, Papa Ron was an interesting person. He'd have all these conversations and all these names would come up, Harry, Maude, and so on, and that would sort of be used as an indicator of some point of view that Papa Ron wanted to make. But one of the things that he said to me a number of times when he was getting older, he said he never wanted to die slowly. He wanted to go out with a big bang. So when he did die, I was actually in Auckland. One of the first things I said to him when I came to the police station to pick him up, where he had already died, I said, well, you got your wish, Dad. You went out with a big bang. He was apparently dead within about a minute. So he was always someone who was, didn't look forward to a long old age. Because when you're like that, you can't go 100 miles an hour. And if Ron Crocombe is someone that you know that everything he did was 100 miles an hour. So, what Mum didn't mention was that Teo was also my godfather. So if any of you want to mess with me, some of my critics in the Cook Islands don't know that I've got a Samoan godfather. If they did, they wouldn't be so critical. Anyway, here's Teo's paper. Crocombe on New Guinea's first development plan, 1968, Dr. Teo Ian Fairbairn. I first met Ron in Wellington in 1958 when he was on his way to Canberra to take up a PhD research scholarship with Jim Davidson at the Australian National University. The meeting was arranged by my father, who worked, as did Ron, for the then Ministry of Island Territories. Ron spoke about his proposed research work at the ANU and offered to speak to Jim Davidson about me as a possible postgraduate candidate. I had just returned from the United States after completing my MA in economics at the University of Washington, Seattle, and was looking around for an opportunity to do further postgraduate studies. Our meeting turned out well for me and proved to be a career-changing event, and before year end I found myself in Canberra being picked up by Ron at the Fishwick railway station. We made our way to University House on a motor scooter, barely enough for the two of us, which Ron had borrowed from a friend. I was highly impressed by Ron's enthusiasm and his knowledge of the Pacific region, which, so I thought, was something I did not expect from a Papalangi. My first impressions were then spot on. Ron's enthusiasm, perhaps more accurately a love affair for things Pacific, remained undiminished throughout his professional life. There is no need to point the enormity of his achievements manifested in his contributions as an academic inspirer of Pacific Island scholars, of whom I may have been his first recruit, and his influence as an advisor and counsellor to numerous Pacific Island leaders, not all of whom listened to his advice. That wasn't in there. Particularly not the Cook Island leaders. That wasn't in there either. In all this, Ron was a daring and fearless advocate, always willing to express his views and observations based on his vast experience in the region and what he perceived as the truth. He could be highly critical of those whom he thought held views that were stereotypical, ill-based, or dead wrong. At times, he could be passionate and even aggressive, but always stimulating and thought-provoking. As a scholar, Ron quickly established himself as an authority on land tenure in the South Pacific, as well as on aspects of culture, social anthropology, and regional issues. These may have been his core interest, but he was never afraid of venturing into less familiar territory. When he did so, he invariably brought some insights and fresh perspectives into issues under consideration. A notable example was his foray into the arcane world of economic planning and development in the context of Papua New Guinea in the 1960s. This was triggered by the publication in 1968 of Papua New Guinea's first development plan, against which Ron launched a trenchant and powerful attack. It would not be an exaggeration to say Ron's criticism of the plan, published in an article in the Papua New Guinea magazine in 1968, came as something of a bombshell, not only for the planning authority, but doubtless for the administration. His critique quickly prompted a counter-response from several quarters, including a number of economists at ANU. The development plan introduced the territory to a system of comprehensive medium-term planning that was fashionable at the time. The plan laid out a set of development objectives, social, economic and cultural, for Papua New Guinea to implement over 5 years, 1968 to 1972. Among the specific objectives were those calling for the maximisation of economic growth, the maximisation of indigenous Papua New Guinea involvement in the development process, and further development of education, skills, infrastructure and financial services. Of these, the maximisation of economic growth was singled out as the most critical requirement for achieving sustainable economic development and rising living standards in the territory. To achieve this growth, the plan set out an implementation strategy that relied heavily on the development of the private sector, foreign investment and skills, and export-orientated production, supported by complementary measures for improving the overall policy and institutional environment for growth. The plan was undoubtedly a significant milestone for Papua New Guinea's ongoing quest for the holy grail of economic and social development. But Ron, as did John Kaputin shortly before, was quick to see it contained serious flaws. He was not critical of planning as such, but was troubled by some of the apparent weaknesses in the plan in terms of policy direction, technical inconsistencies and distortions. Two issues were of particular concern. First was the plan's overriding emphasis on rapid economic growth, as opposed to other development objectives, and particularly that relating to the maximisation of indigenous involvement in their ownership and control of the economy. As he saw it, the pursuit of rapid growth would invariably take place at the expense of other development goals by absorbing a disproportionate share of financial and related resources. Secondly, he drew attention to the fact that the goal of maximising indigenous interests could not possibly be achieved from the strategies and programs for its implementation provided in the plan. These and related flaws, so long as they remain uncorrected, would invariably result in greater foreign domination, especially by Australian interests in the business and economic life of the territory. As such, the plan's commitment to indigenous development amounted to no more than tokenism, a deficiency that would condemn Papua New Guineans to a state of even greater civility as peasants and menial labourers. The extent of foreign domination of the territory's economy, assuming that the provisions of the plan remained unchanged, can be gauged by the following figures based on Ron's own calculations. By the end of the plan period, expatriates who constituted only 2.5% of the total population would control 52% of commercial agriculture, 50% of trade stores, then numbering 4,500, and 75% of beef cattle. Furthermore, expatriates would claim 50% of rural income, and by the 1980s, 90% of business and industries would be in the hands of foreigners. For Ron, the concentration of economic power in the hands of foreigners was extreme, and as in a number of other developing countries, could be potentially powerfully destabilizing effects, not only in the economy, but also in terms of social unrest, political instability, and ethnic tensions. This was hardly the sort of scenario that the territory needed, with political independence not far away. Ron also took exception to the existing policy arrangements as outlined in the plan, specifically favouring Australian investors and business enterprises. This was effected through the exclusion of non-white foreigners and Papua New Guineans from investing in certain industries, including banking, airlines, and broadcasting. These restrictions effectively acted as an invisible tariff, undermining competition and preventing Papua New Guineans from competing on an equal footing with Australians. However, Ron's analysis of the plan was not all negative, and he proffered many ideas and suggestions on possible ways to involve more Papua New Guineans in the economic life of the territory. He supported the use of various forms of protection as a potentially valuable means of boosting indigenous involvement. These included the imposition of selected import tariffs to promote potentially viable import substitution activities, e.g. soft drinks and farm products, and the creation of special reserve areas for Papua New Guineans, especially those where indigenous workers were available or the requisite skills could be quickly learned, e.g. retail trading, taxi driving, and air hostesses. Also worthy of consideration was the judicious application of business licenses as a means of opening up more opportunities for Indigenous entrepreneurs. Furthermore, Ron